Have you ever wondered what it really took to become a Christian back in the first century? Today, we're going on a quest to find out if there was an original blueprint for belief.
So, let's get right to it. If we look at the very first conversions, is there some kind of predictable pattern, a clear plan that people followed? Let's dive in and see what the evidence shows.
To figure this out, we have to go right back to the beginning. We're starting with a single event that kicked off the entire Christian movement, the day of Pentecost.
So picture this, Jerusalem. Thousands of people are gathered, and the Apostle Peter gets up and gives this incredibly powerful sermon, and he does not hold back. He tells the crowd point blank that they are personally responsible for crucifying Jesus, who he says is their Lord and their Messiah.
The crowd's reaction is just electric. The text says they were cut to the heart. This isn't just them being curious. It's this deep, gut-level conviction. And their response is so immediate, they actually interrupt the sermon to shout out this one crucial question. They're desperate to know how to make things right.
And Peter's answer is direct. It's a clear, two-part instruction. And the result? It is just staggering. About 3,000 people respond, and they get baptized on that very same day. This event right here gives us our first massive piece of the conversion blueprint.
Okay, so Pentecost seems to set up a really clear sequence. But you have to wonder, right? Was this just a one-off event, or is this a blueprint that we're going to see again and again? Let's see if the pattern holds.
And what's really fascinating here is that when you look across different accounts, it all seems to boil down to this simple three-step blueprint. First, someone has to hear the message about Jesus. Second, they have to actually believe it. And third, that new belief is put into action right away through baptism. Let's see how this works in a totally different situation. Now, check this out. We see the exact same pattern play out, but this time, the circumstances are way more dramatic. You've got Paul and Silas in a Roman prison, a miraculous earthquake sets them free, and their terrified jailer asks them almost the same question we heard at Pentecost: what must I do to be saved? And the timeline here is just, wow. It is incredibly fast. Everything happens in the same hour of the night. The message is preached, and his entire family is baptized at once. There's no waiting period, no classes to take. And notice this little detail. The rejoicing happens after they're baptized. That's an interesting point to tuck away.
All right, so we're seeing a pretty consistent pattern emerge. But, any good investigation has to take a hard look at the evidence that doesn't seem to fit. Are there any cases out there that break this mold? Well, it turns out there are a couple of really famous accounts that, at first glance, seem to totally break our simple three-step model. But here's the thing. These outliers are actually the key to unlocking the whole picture. Okay, puzzle number one is a Roman army officer named Cornelius. For him, the sequence is all jumbled up. He and his family hear the gospel, they believe, and then get this, they receive the Holy Spirit all before being baptized. This is the only time it's recorded this way. So what on earth is going on here? Peter's reaction is what tells us everything. He doesn't say, oh, well, you've already got the Spirit, so I guess baptism is optional now. No way. He sees the Holy Spirit's arrival as God's stamp of approval, divine proof that these non-Jews should be welcomed into the fold. So what does he do? He immediately commands them to be baptized. The exception actually proves the rule.
The second puzzle involves the Samaritans. Now, they follow the blueprint perfectly. They hear, they believe, and they're baptized. But the Holy Spirit doesn't show up until the apostles travel down from Jerusalem. This delay actually served a critical purpose. It was all about unity. It ensured that these two groups, who had been enemies for centuries, were clearly and visibly united under one authority, preventing a major split in the early church.
So even when we dig into the outliers, we find that their strange sequences were there to solve very specific one-time problems. But through all of it, the normal cases and the strange ones, one step remains totally constant, completely non-negotiable, across every single account.
When you just look at the raw numbers, it's unambiguous. 9 out of 9. Every single time a conversion story is recorded in the book of Acts, baptism is there. That's a 100% track record. There are 0 recorded instances of someone being called a Christian without it. This quote just perfectly captures the urgency of it all. Think about it.
This is being said to the Apostle Paul himself, right after he had this life-altering, blinding vision of Jesus on the road to Damascus. And the very first instruction he gets isn't a long theology lesson. It's a simple, urgent question. And now, why do you wait? The expectation was immediate action.
So just look at this chart. When you lay the key accounts out side by side, the pattern is just impossible to ignore. From Jewish crowds to an Ethiopian official to a Roman jailer, look down the columns. The gospel is preached? Check. They believe? Check. Immediate baptism? Check, 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 check. It's always there.
Looking at all this historical evidence, it kind of leads us to a final, pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? How does this original first-century blueprint connect to how we think about faith and practice today?
So, let's just boil it all down. What's the core pattern we've seen? The message about Jesus is always ground zero. A personal response of faith is absolutely required. But then, baptism isn't treated like some optional ceremony down the road. It is the immediate, universal, physical expression of that faith. Hearing, believing, and being baptized were treated like one single, seamless event.
And that brings us to a final, challenging question for us to think about. If the historical record shows this clear, consistent pattern, a blueprint defined by urgency and immediate action, why does becoming a Christian today often look so different? Why are there often long delays, with baptism sometimes treated as an optional extra for later? It turns this ancient pattern into a kind of mirror, asking us to reflect on our own practices, and that's definitely something worth thinking about.